What's that? Good morning, I'm Jim Check with Kelowna Now. On the phone with me, Ian Burns. Hey, we got a new little icon there for you in the morning there now. We got another little sidebar. Look at our tech. We're up in our game in tech here. Beautiful day in the Okanagan. A little cloudy, sun poking out, traffic flowing along Highway 97 there. How are things in Ottawa?
Exceedingly snowy. There was what they called a squall, snow squall last night, and it just brought chaos to the capital. So it's been fun.
Isn't that where all the MPs are? There's always chaos in Ottawa, no? Start off with a
Yeah.
joke, right? There you go. We got some numbers from Stats Canada. Unemployment numbers slightly eased in Canada, but slightly up in BC.
Yeah. Just tiny though. I mean, both of them are tiny.
Yeah.
The national decline and BC increase are both like so small that I mean, I'm not even sure why they even bother with this because it's so tiny that it means nothing really, does it? But I mean, in terms of BC, Kelowna's is slightly better, down 0.3 percentage points, but some other places not looking very good, like Vancouver and Nanaimo. They're all pretty high, so not ideal.
But it is high across Canada, though. It's still relatively high at 6.6%, right? So that's still a high unemployment rate in Canada. And that's
Definitely.
why likely the Bank of Canada needs to ease a few more times, and they've been talking about that. Our economy is not doing well, so they're likely going to need to ease a little bit more, especially when you consider people's mortgages as well.
Yeah. What was interesting about the Statistics Canada release, though, is they talk about manufacturing and how crucial the US is for Canada when it comes to manufacturing and how many jobs are kind of that they depend on the US, or they depend on free trade with the US anyway. So a lot of that package that they released today was about that and how devastating for manufacturing it would be. But 23 no, not 23, sorry, it was anyway, tens of thousands. I think it was 33,000 or something like that, manufacturing jobs. They were the most. That was the largest sector, the biggest growth. And 8,700 of those were in BC, which is quite interesting. I think you don't usually think of BC as, a manufacturing center, but that's pretty good news, I guess.
And then from Holly Dillon and Blacklock's, another good story out of there, saying the climate error very costly to the insurers, saying that the Insurance Bureau of Canada says we were aghast. They've been focusing on energy efficiency on homes and not climate resiliency. And we've seen all these homes burning to the ground, and they're saying that needs to change. We need to focus on climate resiliency. And that's, like things like metal roofs and stuff like that, stuff that doesn't burn, clearing away like fire fuel near homes and stuff like that. We still are building homes with, wood or asphalt shingles and vinyl siding and all that kind of stuff. These types of things are not great for homes when a fire approaches a home.
Yep. I mean, one of many blunders in the race to adapt to climate change, I think. There's many examples of mistakes of this kind and wrong things being prioritized, but like most kind of emergency situations, I suppose, where people act really quickly, there are huge numbers of mistakes.
And then part of it is like building better homes in better places. Craig Stewart from the Bureau of Vice President of Federal Affairs, we need to address the gap on building codes. Like a lot of homes, even in the Kelowna area, are still being built in dense forest, and with that's a lot of fuel around a home.
Yeah, forests shouldn't be so nice to live in, should they? Those damn things.
Yeah, and then we have this the video to play on pipelines. Go ahead and play that.
Fiercely opposed to any type of transport on Quebec territory of hydrocarbons from Western Canada to any market whatsoever. It does not serve Quebec. It does not serve the environment. It does not serve the planet.
See,
It's a mirage that we are always being told. The LNG zombie that was never really alive, that we reanimate as a kind of slogan. The pro-hydrocarbon speech that even Mr. Carney is starting to hold as if there were a future in Western Canadian hydrocarbons. The sacrifice of interests in green energies that make Quebec rich.
And there you have it. Still no interest in a pipeline to the east.
Yeah, it's funny that he said that. It's like no interest, no benefit to Quebec. The last time I was in Quebec, the other day, I saw quite a lot of people driving cars powered by oil. So obviously it's some benefit to them, isn't it?
Yeah,
Although they get that from elsewhere rather than Alberta.
they did get quite a few projects there, like massive ones, like I think like Lionor, I believe, like battery EV projects that have now failed though too. I think Northvolt, I might get those names wrong, but there's a big battery project that has failed in Quebec, and Quebec was on the receiving end of a lot of those corporate, what you call welfare handouts.
Indeed, yeah, state-sponsored sort of projects. They tend to go to Quebec quite often, don't they? But I mean, this chap, like a lot of politicians in Quebec, is just completely beholden to special interests, isn't he? Like, I'm pretty sure it was this very press conference, where he went on to talk about how crucial it was that the supply management system remains in place, which
Yep.
is pretty much the number one objection from the Americans in terms of trade deals with Canada. It's like they find that absolutely mind-boggling, and it infuriates them that Canada has this completely sealed off dairy sector. And also, if you remember, all that fanfare about trying to get a free trade deal with the British, it fell apart because of this supply management. So it's kind of, I mean, it's hard. Like politics in Quebec it's so confusing, and it's so difficult to navigate because there are so many extremely powerful special interest groups that force anybody that wants to be elected to say completely contradictory things that are completely bizarre to somebody on the outside that still lives in the world of facts and logic. Just makes no sense to the average person. But that's how I see Blanchette's latest utterances.
And the Liberal government under Trudeau has definitely served Quebec's interest first.
Yeah, because that is there's a reason they call them the Laurentian elite, because that's where that's like their homeland. That's their base in HQ, and Montreal is like the capital of their project. And Montreal has a huge proportion of the overall population of Quebec. They basically call the shots in Quebec, and they have a very particular kind of politics. And a lot of it as well is colored by their abundant hydro. Same in BC, really. It's like they have all this hydro, so they just think, well, why should we have oil or gas? Because we've got dams, and it's quite a myopic perspective, some argue, but that's basically it, isn't it? That's the politics of Montreal.
Today's the big day. Liberal leadership candidates have to cough up another $125,000 in addition to the 100 they've already put up. Like the total is 350. So this is another drop date. So I believe, and we've got a picture of some of the candidates that are still running in this, like a Hollywood Squares there. Jamie Baptiste or whatever, he dropped in the first 50,000, so he would have got his $50,000 back. So now, who's left after? Because now they put in 50 initially, that was refundable, and they put up another 50, and now we're at 125. And I've been getting emails from all these people in their fundraising efforts. And it's, I mean, if I was to make a guess today, I don't believe Frank and Karina Gold push on from here. It'll be interesting to see, like, who's left after today.
Frankie has already said that he has the money. Frank the Tank there. So I mean, if
There you go.
he didn't continue, then I guess it would be because he would come out and say he's done a deal with Carney or something, or in so many words. Karina Gould says she doesn't have the money, so I would expect her to be out, but she thinks she's confident she'll get it. And then Ruby is just like the mad candidate that has no real, it's just like completely bizarre. I don't know, looking like she's coming out of Madame Two Swords there.
She the money goes into the Liberal coffers though. If they don't make it or whatever, so they're basically fundraising for the Liberal Party at the same time. If they're a long shot. I mean, the favorite according to Poly Markets is Mark Carney by a long shot, like 95% or something.
Yeah, so King Carney, he's definitely going to want them to get the money out, isn't he? Because it will go straight into his war chest.
Yeah, they'll be phoning them up and saying, "Come on, stick to it, stick to it.
Come on, Karina."
You can do it." Yeah, so there you go. It'll be interesting that it's 5 o'clock, I think, Eastern, right? 5 p.m. Eastern that the money has to show up.
Yeah, and
It is
these imperialist liberals don't even mention that it's Eastern time. It's just 5 p.m. to you, sir, even though it's 2 p.m. Pacific time.
Yeah, we all live in Toronto apparently, or Ottawa.
Yeah.
Oh, Mark Carney's emails to me typically just says, "Dear first name." Well, actually, it doesn't say "Dear first name," it says "first name." But then he's fixed it recently, and it just misses the capitalization of my name. But
Well, you don't get a capital letter for your first name until you're a big shot like Mark, do you? So I think you should just be happy that he's addressing you at all, really. That's your privilege.
But it's odd that they have the same list, and then when Justin Trudeau emails me, he gets my name right and the capitalization, but he must have sent out the inferior list to the candidates that are running.
That's Justin Trudeau's noblesse oblige, though, isn't it? He knows how to make the little people feel good. Good old Justin.
There you go. And then you can introduce this next clip here. This is the former British Prime Minister talking to Brian Lilly and giving her reflection of Mark Carney and England.
Disastrous economic policies that have ruined the British economy.
Get us going again. What would you say to them?
I would say that Mark Carney has been one of the architects of the disastrous economic policies that have ruined the British economy, but also more generally from the sort of Davos-led elite, ruined economies across Europe and across other parts of the world. So he has already demonstrated that he does not have the economic knowledge that's required to actually deliver growth. And we have seen the results of that stagnation in Britain. And my advice to the Canadians would be, do not go down the British path. We are now in serious danger of a financial crisis where the British government won't be able to fund its debt.
Yeah, they don't like Carney. A lot of people. I mean, in many ways, she's not an ideal person to be talking about other people's economic plans, because time will tell in the coming decades, but she's generally considered to be the worst prime minister in the history of Britain. She lasted about 49 days.
I was going to say 49 days.
Yeah, put through a budget that completely spooked the markets. The Bank of England had to then intervene and buy loads of bonds and do loads of stupid financial wizardry that these people entertain themselves with. And there was a pension scare as well, the way that pensions are funded. I mean, she screwed up big time. So like the messenger's not ideal, but she's not the only one that says this kind of thing. That Carney inflated an asset bubble and just kept the British economy kind of like bouncing along in a pretty unhealthy way. But yeah, I mean, it's just a shame that she's the messenger, I suppose. Well, oh, you could look at it as a good thing. If you're on Team Carney, this is the person that you would want to be attacking you, because she has absolutely no credibility anywhere in the world.
There you go. She probably gave Kim Campbell a run, though. I can't remember who lasted longer. Kim Campbell, way back in the day when she took over for Brian Mulroney, when they switched out their leader. No different than what's happening right now as the Liberals try to switch out their leader.
Kim Campbell was 131 days,
Well, look at Kim.
according
Kim hung
to
in there longer.
the internet. Oh yeah, like nearly 3 times as long as poor old Liz. I'm sorry to say though, Liz Truss. I've met Liz Truss. I interviewed her, and back when she was just an MP before she'd risen to the heights of Prime Minister, and I remember being quite amazed by how little there was there. I'm sorry to say, Liz, if you listen to this, I know you are. Very nice, very friendly woman, and like quite fun as well, quite sort of like jocular, but really didn't seem to have what you need to be the leader of a big country. And I can say I was not even remotely surprised that she crashed and burned. But I don't know. She's now trying to kind of reinvent herself as like this anti-establishment figure that goes around talking about how Davos runs the world and all that kind of thing. But I mean, I get the sense that that's a little bit opportunistic because she was never saying anything really like that when she was in the Tory party as trying to climb the ranks.
Yeah, so then this is from a Canadian athlete. CTV had reached out to her and she's tweeted this out, asked her to do an interview regarding Trump's order banning transgender women from sports. And her reply was, "You mean men from women's sports?" So then I asked them to send me the questions ahead of time so I'm prepped, or will it be live or edited? And then she didn't get a response. And so she's pushing that out there.
Well, just to add context here, no journalist, no journalist with even a tiny particle of self-respect will tell somebody they want to interview what the questions are ahead of time. That just does not happen. And if somebody responds to you, like you try and interview somebody and they respond saying, "Give me the questions ahead of time," I would say not responding is probably the most generous thing that you could do, because the alternative would be to scream their head off, because it's completely insane to ask for the questions ahead of time. That's not how this works. That's not how journalism works.
Yeah, she also sent out this other tweet here. She said she sent an invite to CBC and CTV asking, more than willing to do interviews. There you go. In BC, Eleanor Sturtko is definitely really working this right now. We got a video to play here. Go ahead and play that video.
When Dr. Henry gives us advice, we follow that advice.
I support legalization and regulation of drugs.
Dr. Henry recommended expanding access to hard drugs outside of the healthcare system,
including broadening the availability and types of drugs that can be prescribed, like smokable fentanyl.
Physicians are afraid that if they prescribe and it's diverted to an opioid-naive user, they may become opioid dependent and they may die. And that may happen to some people.
Anytime anybody on methadone asks the doctor, please give me a safe supply, they're just selling it, and they're going to buy fentanyl.
Dolph has been funded by the province, Coastal Health giving it $200,000 a year for testing. This Compassion Club in Vancouver's downtown east side was public about buying hard drugs, including cocaine and heroin, on the dark web.
We do have funding from our local health authority because the problem in Vancouver is very, very severe.
We can't use any of that money to buy drugs.
Right. No, we can't use their money to buy drugs. There's a lot of laundry.
So the drugs situation has really been highlighted with what Donald Trump is pushing with these tariffs and taking care of our border. There was that recent BBC article, I think it was BBC, English article anyway, on Vancouver being named the drug capital of the world.
That was the Telegraph, yeah.
The Telegraph, there you go.
That was attacked big time for being disingenuous, though, we should say. But I mean, for that, what you said, being the drug capital of the world or whatever sort of claim they made, I don't think it was that, but it was some sort of claim like that, which wasn't quite accurate. But what was certainly accurate about the article was the images of sort of horrible distress and sadness and degeneracy on the streets of Vancouver because they went with a photographer. A lot of it was really just about the images, and it was dreadful. Lots of pictures like that. What you've got there, just people kind of lying there in the streets.
Yeah.
That video you just showed was an ad that they ran, wasn't it, before
That's
the
correct.
election,
Yeah.
the BC Conservatives? Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think that was a really strong point for the BC Conservatives, wasn't it? It was a really strong part of their platform, and it seemed to resonate with a lot of people. I mean, it seemed to resonate to the extent that even EB backtracked quite a lot on a lot of the NDP's policies, didn't he? And he kind of requested, sent off that request to Ottawa, didn't he, to have the legalization experiment, or decriminalization, whichever word you prefer, for that to be suspended, and he started introduce that law, didn't he, to try and tighten up rules about where you can take drugs in public and all sorts of things, and that also forced treatment for people as well. It's another thing that these are all things that the NDP once kind of decried as despicable. So clearly that worked for the BC Conservatives, and I think it's not just Vancouver. It's like down in Oregon, San Francisco, obviously, Seattle, increasingly now also in Eastern Canada, like Ottawa, another place that has a problem with sort of public drug use and homelessness. I think it's been quite a while now, hasn't it? It's been a number of years now that the Bonnie Henry approach to the drug crisis has been experimented with, and I think a lot of people, both kind of like ordinary people and so-called experts, think now that maybe the evidence is in and it's not been very successful. So, and certainly a lot of politicians make that argument. So that's clearly what the BC Conservatives are doing. I think they're trying to tap into that sense among the electorate that this hasn't worked. This policy or these, this set of policies hasn't worked.
Yeah, Eleanor Sturco's been on it for the last few days here, asking for Bonnie Henry's job. And Eleanor
They've
Sturco
wanted that. The BC Conservatives have wanted that for a long time, haven't they? They've been saying that for ages. She's quite a controversial figure, nationally as well. It's not just in BC. A lot of other sort of national figures have called for her to be turfed. But yeah, she there's no suggestion that the NDP want to get rid of her, but you never know with these things.
So we got a poll here. Canadian support for C2C pipelines near 80%. I guess it doesn't matter if Quebec says no on that side of the board, unless we look at Churchill.
Well, Quebec says yes, if you look at this poll.
Yeah, the people say yes, but not the government.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm very surprised by that. Unless they think that there's another way to get to the sea that doesn't involve Quebec. I don't know.
Yeah, that's why I'm
But
saying
it's
Churchill.
not possible.
Churchill might be the option. I mean, they should do both. Yeah, they should look at both, right? All three. And
well, the Energy East plan went to New Brunswick, didn't it? It just transited through Quebec, and that was enough to annoy the Quebecois. Although, I mean, it is very hard to say because, like I said, the special interest groups, they are so powerful. Like the dairy thing is absolutely crackers if you choose to investigate that. Very few countries on this planet have supply management. Mostly kind of centrally planned economies, like communist economies. It's really it's a really weird feature, but that just shows how strong the special interest groups are. And I just watched the Prime Minister, because he's hosting that conference right now in, I think it's Toronto, about how to react to the US tariffs and strengthen the Canadian economy. And he's out there attacking special interests in one way or another. He's talking about all the interprovincial trade barriers. And that's just special interest groups, isn't it? Like they just demand that they have their little pet project implemented, whatever it is, or their pet regulation. And then even Trudeau now is railing against it. So, I mean, you never know, do you? But it might be the beginning of a change. It might be possible to change.
Well, if anything, the good that might come out of the these threats from the United States is that we open up our trade barriers across Canada and recognize that our wealth is beneath our feet. But like it's, some of the response from the Quebec government is not showing that to be very positive.
Yeah, well, it's certainly not the elected officials aren't happy about it, are they? They're not they're not very positive about it. So, I mean, we'll see. But the thing is with the interprovincial trade barriers as well, that's a reflection of the reality that money, capital, and all the rest of it, like the free market, creates a situation where whatever's easiest will be what's done, really. Whatever costs the least is what's done. And it costs the least to go north-south, doesn't it? Which is why all the provinces trade with the US more than with Canada. Except I think there's one, isn't there, like PEI or something, which is the exception. But like the reason that that has been the case is because that's just human nature, and that's also the nature of economics, really. So it would require such a huge change and such a different attitude to economics. So it would count as a revolution. I would say it'd be an extremely significant turning point for Canada.
Melanie Jolie, never one to shy away from the microphone. Again, talking about Trump. She's against the idea of clearing out Gaza. I mean, Donald Trump is saying it's a demolition site, and obviously, his idea is to take it over. Which I don't think. I have no idea what his idea is, but other than like say to rebuild that thing, just like in a demolition site, because it looks pretty bad if you see some of the photos. Like, there's no place for most people to live there.
Yeah, I think the majority of homes have been either damaged or destroyed, which is pretty nuts. More than 2 million people were living there before before Hamas launched this war, started this war with Israel quite a disgusting fashion on October 7th, 2023. But another interesting thing about this, what Jolie said is the Israeli, like a senior figure in the Israeli government, the defense minister, a chap called Israel Katz, has come out and said, just totally brazenly insulted Canada and also actually Ireland and Spain, like countries that are perceived to be anti-Israel from the Israeli perspective anyway. But he came out and said Canada's got like a nice open immigration system, and they've welcomed some people from Gaza, so maybe they'll take in lots of Gazan refugees. And Israel's being quite cheeky there, and it's basically trying to I think it perceives the Liberal government as being too friendly to the Palestinian cause and not friendly enough to the Israelis. So they're basically settling scores, I think, and suggesting that Canada could take refugees from Gaza. But that's not popular in Canada for obvious reasons. I mean, Hamas, which is a racist terrorist organization, has run Gaza now for just about 20 years. The people that live there have been trapped for that long. They literally have been unable to leave. It's not like Egypt sealed the border, and so did Israel, and the airspace is controlled by Israel, and so is the sea space. So they had no way to escape, and they've lived in this horrible territory ruled over by psychopaths. I mean, how do you vet people who've lived there for their whole lives in some cases, So you can see why people are kind of like doubtful about this in places like Canada and elsewhere. I mean, this is why it's hard for people to just dismiss Trump's like mad idea entirely, because nobody else seems to have any ideas, It's like it's the ultimate problem probably in the world. It's just completely intractable.
Yeah, and then we're talking about immigration. Carney's former deputy says mass immigration has not improved the UK economy.
Yeah, I mean, in quite a funny way. Like these people, central bankers, but all sorts of people like this, they just speak in such a stupid way. Like that, it's almost like they're afraid to say anything because they know that like world markets kind of can be influenced by what they say. But in his sort of like stulted language, he said, "We've got more population, we've got more labor force, we've got the same output. So you can only conclude that you have got lower productivity. So in his sort of like bizarre idiot language, what he said is mass immigration has not worked. The country is not richer. It's actually
Andrew.
considerably poorer in terms of GDP per capita. And the only possible explanation is we're less productive. So these immigrants are not as productive, or they bring down the productivity of the native population.
But,
So,
yeah.
it's a quite controversial thing to say, but he obviously said it in that particularly stupid way that not many people can translate it, I suppose.
Yeah, he said it has bloated the public sector, though. We've seen that here in
Yeah.
Canada as well. I think.
Well, the thing is, the British and Canadian economies are quite similar, like the political economies, at least, if you think about it, like the decision making. The fundamentals are different, like Canada's in a better debt situation and some other areas. But yeah, they are quite similar, really bloated public sectors and immigration that has just gone crazy and hasn't made the country richer. So very, very similar, actually.
Speaking of your friends in England there's all of a sudden long lineups to get their gold bars out of the Bank of England.
Bit of arbitrage. Take it to the US and get more. I mean, that's almost like Trump's dream, isn't it? Really, it's like people moving their wealth. I mean, gold is just the most like obvious representation of wealth, I suppose. But he wants people to move their wealth to the US so that they no longer have to fear tariffs, pretty much. And that seems to be the story here. People are scared of the tariff situation and that it would cost more to bring gold into the US. So they want to get it over with now, bring it in and keep it in a safe space in the US.
Well, there's no long lineups in Canada for gold bars at the Bank of Canada because there's no gold.
Yeah, that's sad. I mean, these are private holdings rather than national holdings. Yeah. But I'm not sure about the situation of private holdings in Canada. Yeah, I don't actually, must confess ignorance on that one.
Well, there's definitely no Canadian holdings no reserve of gold. Let's move to markets and gold. Gold up again this morning. Again, this is a year chart. Gold looking like it wants to challenge that $2,900 mark. It was up more this morning as well, and it's kind of backed off a little bit. Right now it's sitting at 28.58. It's backed off a little bit. But again, in Canadian dollars, gold is just under the $4,100 mark at 4,087. So quite a difference there, right? You can see what our dollar looks like when you can have $2,800 American or $4,100 Canadian to buy the same thing.
Yeah, it's not great right now. It hasn't been for quite a number of months.
And then if we move on to our friend Bitcoin. Bitcoin up again this morning, still bouncing in that $100,000 range. Kind of like holding that line, kind of like basing there. I think that wind is in the sails of Bitcoin, and like a lot of things, very positive for Bitcoin with the new U.S. administration being very positive, the new SEC chairman and all that stuff, and talk about making Bitcoin a reserve asset and all that stuff. I had somebody trying to convince me the other day that should be buying other alternative coins, and I said, well, I mean, they might be great speculations, but the Bitcoin is the only one that's being considered, I think, as a reserve asset. And it is a traded ETF, and that's so, I mean, be very careful when people are suggesting all these other coins are cheaper and they're good buys. A lot of them are just meme coins. And I think a lot of people have started up these coins. And I think the Hakta girl or whatever was on the internet, and she created a coin and raised lots of money. And then basically the coin collapsed the next day and she hasn't been seen for a while. I don't know if she's back on the internet, but they were looking for her. Couldn't find her after she made a bundle off of that stuff.
Well, and Trump as well. Even the president of the United States is in on this. I mean, it's the only other one that I've heard of that's taken seriously is Ethereum, and that is, by all accounts, that is a pretty serious one, isn't it? But I don't know about any other one.
It's more of a transactional coin, whereas Bitcoin, I think that's still its bigger problem. Like, you even have the Vancouver mayor saying he wants to make Vancouver the Bitcoin capital of Canada, It's the transactional part of it though that's tough. A lot of people don't even know how to transact in it. It's definitely not as easy as people think, and a lot of people that own it don't want to sell it because they believe it's going to whatever the numbers are, some crazy numbers. So it's a tough thing to get people to transact in. Whereas I think in Ethereum, people are more willing to transact in it because they're not holding it for different things. Actually, I have a little bit of Ethereum, and I put some of that in the poly markets, and I'm just playing with that just to kind of like see. You can bet on anything in the poly markets, and we're using it actually to test like some of these polls and see how its relevance is compared to just actual polling that's out there. And we've seen some pretty good correlation in the poly markets being a little more accurate and a little less biased.
Yeah, people putting their money where their mouths are.
People put the money down, but I guess at some point you could game that too by just putting in buy it by just kind of like putting a lot of money on one thing, right? Canadian dollar, next thing we'll look at here. Again, we saw that huge drop down there at the far right of the chart, and that was the Trump tariffs. And then obviously just prior to the announcement, the dollar spiked back up, and it's kind of holding that line. Definitely an election would, and a favorable environment for our natural wealth would see that dollar recover dramatically. I think there's a good trade there if you believe that we're going to get a favorable environment for our natural wealth that's located beneath our feet. That big merger we were talking about, Nissan Honda, fell apart. Nissan said it looked like more of a takeover, and they basically called the deal, and it collapsed. So Nissan looking for a new partner. I think they're definitely on the ropes as well, though. They have a lot of debt out there. And neither Nissan or Honda really have a really good EV strategy. So tough for the automakers, especially when they're competing against giants now out there like BYD in China, and like lots of EV makers in China. And they that's the largest auto market in the world. And it's going mostly EV. Well over 50% now of new car purchases in China are EVs. And they make these things really high tech and cheap.
Yeah, I think one of the few countries, Western countries, that doesn't tariff them out of existence is the UK actually, and I think they've seen like massive amounts of sales because they can just undercut. They can just undercut, like, obviously Tesla, blow Tesla out of the water completely on price, but they can undercut everybody else as well, can't they?
And the price of petrol in the UK, not cheap, but EVs cheap, and they've got a pretty good network. So EV sales are really strong in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, but electricity is also probably the most expensive in the world in the UK as well. So maybe a lot of people with their own personal wind turbine or something trying to get that precious electricity in.
Does the sun shine in the UK so you can have solar or what?
That's a really touchy subject actually. The sun pretty much does not shine in the UK. No, it's one of the least sunny places on the planet actually, outside of like the Arctic and some really cloudy parts of South America. So yeah, not the place for solar. Although the British, in their infinite wisdom and genius and their ability to teach the world how to do the right thing, have got loads and loads of solar panel fields on very arable land, like the beautiful agricultural land. They've thought, yeah, let's stick solar panels there, even though the sun doesn't shine. But that's another subject altogether.
Perhaps it's a great place to sell umbrellas. There's my
Actually,
for the day.
It rains considerably more in Vancouver. I always found that funny when I was living in Vancouver. People would say they would say something like, "Oh yeah, it's really rainy, isn't it? God, you must be used to this kind of thing because I come from London." It's like, no, London is like a quarter of has about a quarter of the rainfall of Vancouver. It's like London, like the east of England is actually a very dry place. So no, I'll reject that one. But when it comes to sunshine, yeah, I mean, I don't know why they don't like inject vitamin D into people in the street in England, because there's a real lack of sunshine. It's one of the worst things about England, actually. It's one of the most depressing things about the country.
Kind of dreary for sure. Like the Okanagan gets a lot of sunshine, so we're very fortunate. In the wintertime, we don't get a lot, but for the most part, it's just sunny. They call it the sunny Okanagan. Lots of vitamin D out there for you. You don't have to inject yourself.
Yeah, but if you want even more, get yourself to Saskatchewan and Alberta and the south of those provinces. That's where you get the most sunshine in Canada.
In our AI sector, AI scoring a humanities last exam. Look at this. Look at this hockey stick curve, just going crazy. It's amazing. And look at the timeline. Look at the timeline on the bottom, and look at the advancements, right?
So what is humanities last exam?
Yeah, just saying like this thing is getting smarter and smarter every moment, right? If you look at it, how smart it was in July of 24 and the increase in the scores. And this is OpenAI's deep research. And you can see DeepSeek down there too, right? That, was that big threat that was released from China. So the advancement
so
is...
I'm guessing this is like a test that they have to sit or something to see. Yeah. Very interesting. We approach the what is it, the Turing test. We approach the moment where one can pass that.
Yeah. And this is a really cool one. This is a lot, and I've seen a lot of this at the CES in Las Vegas when I was there for a week. A lot of agricultural robots, and this one is pretty impressive. We're going to play this clip here.
אין מספיק אנשים, וכשמסתכלים קדימה, מאוד ברור שיהיו עוד פחות אנשים.
So yeah, so we did an AI summit here in Kelowna in September, and we had a local company here out of Salmon Arm. They did vision-based harvesting for mushrooms, and they were using a similar type thing, except there weren't drones. So they were in a rack. They were growing these mushrooms, and the efficiency on the quality was better. The quantity was better, and the maturity of the mushroom was better, and no bruising. And the same thing as what's going on here. They're using suction air to kind of pull these apples off the tree, so less bruising and all kinds of things. And it's an area where it's really tough to get people to pick the fruit, and it's kind of remarkable how these things are operating out there.
Yeah, and like the chap said that, I think he was speaking Hebrew, wasn't he? So I think that's in Israel. But what he was saying there was he was talking about how they don't have enough people to pick the fruit, and that's a problem that we see everywhere.
Yeah.
That's happening. It's not even just the Western world where that happens. It's all over the place that there's this lack of, because there's just a lack of young people in most of, on many parts of the world. And certainly a lack of young people who are willing to do jobs like that, which are obviously very, very hard, very tiring, and don't really pay very well. So, I mean, this could be the answer to so many of our like fundamental problems that we face in this century, like particularly related to the birth rate and related to things like migration and all that kind of thing. I mean, it could be quite magnificent, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in Kelowna, we have a strong agricultural component, and we do use the migrant worker program to have our fruit harvested. And I'm sure a lot of people will be looking at these types of things to harvest. I did see when I was at CES, there's a robot that actually goes out there and picks the strawberries. And actually, not only does it pick the strawberries, it actually goes out, like as the fruits, the flowers are coming, it kind of like makes sure the flowers are exposed properly, and then takes off the, like prunes them and does a whole bunch of different things. So it's really, it's a lower robot. It's not a flying one like this. And this one reminds me of like an alien movie or something, where all these kind of tentacles are kind of moving around, flying around. Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I mean, it's like the future, isn't it? It's like we're in the future, but we haven't quite realized that the future is the present. If that makes any sense, which probably
Yeah,
doesn't.
the future is now. We are holding another AI summit here in September of 2025, and we did have Peter Diamandis, one of the top 50 people in the world on future technologies that we had. He was a keynote here last year, and we don't have our keynote selected yet, but you can be sure that there's going to be a lot of development, and things are accelerating at an accelerating pace. Danielle Smith.
And one of the
What's that?
Sorry, I was just going to say one of the speakers at that conference, at the last one, he was actually based in Salmon Arm, wasn't he? And he was
that's the
he
mushroom
created
picker.
the mushroom pickers, yeah. But he made a very interesting point about the mushrooms that that resonated with me anyway. I found very interesting, which is he just talked about how much that job actually sucks to pick mushrooms, because you have to be in the dark, because obviously the conditions that mushrooms thrive in are almost like the exact opposite of what the conditions that humans thrive in. It's got to be like damp and dark.
And manure.
You've got to use chicken poo as fertilizer.
Yeah.
It's a really unpleasant job, and it's almost like if we can eliminate the need for humans to do jobs like that, then that's got to be considered a victory for civilization, hasn't it?
Yeah, you can use any adjective you want, but it's a really smelly job, and dark, and it's in racks. Mushrooms thrive in that condition, and vision-based robotics is really kind of it's where all this stuff, the future is at, because the vision-based stuff, every time that robot picks a mushroom, it learns from the last mushroom it picked. You know what I mean? It looks at it, analyzes that mushroom, and said, okay, we don't pick. Like it'll wait 2 hours to pick that mushroom if it doesn't think it's optimum time to pick that mushroom. The same thing as that thing that's picking apples, right? And it's no different than a Tesla driving on full self-drive. It's using vision-based. It's not LiDAR or sonar or radar or any of those things. It's just using your eyes, using its eyes like you use your eyes to judge what's going on out there.
And it becomes, like you said, like you've implied there, it becomes like an expert, doesn't it? The more experience it has, the better it gets. And obviously, because of how much that job sucks, people don't tend to have like 30 or 40-year careers picking mushrooms. So it could theoretically become the greatest mushroom picker of all time, just through sheer experience.
And the cool thing about the mushroom one, or the interesting thing, is he has 50 programmers working on this development, but the software itself is now writing its own code. So it's learning from things and writing code. So the software developers are actually writing themselves out of a job at the same time, because the robot's taking over in writing that software, the AI.
Well, they'll be outside some government building calling for UBI, won't they? They'll be at the front of the UBI protest queue.
Danielle Smith with a big announcement. Alberta welcomes, she has a lot of the announcements, welcomes the world's first fully integrated off-grid Bitcoin mining facility. So it's a 101 megawatt site gas-fired project in Alberta to deliver the industry's first fully integrated Bitcoin mining site. Bitcoin mining banned in British Columbia because of energy needs, but Alberta welcoming these companies. This is in Fox Creek. I used to work in Fox Creek when I was a youth. I was working worked at a construction site in Fox Creek. Big oil and gas area, Fox Creek, and obviously that's the reason that that this company went there. And this 101 megawatt gas-fired power project can scale to a gigawatt. I mean, that's a lot of power, a gigawatt of power. I think that Site C Dam is maybe a gigawatt and a half. So just think of the potential power that's being created. And this is all being used for fintech.
It is very interesting. I mean, this is something that Pierre Poilievre used to talk about quite a lot, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like some other people on the right, for some reason, they're really keen to get into Bitcoin mining, aren't they? But it certainly plays to Canada's strength: abundant energy and cold climate, because you need to cool these places down, don't you? Because they get so hot.
And I've said this for a while. Alberta is poised to become the Saudi Arabia of the Western world, because not only does it have cheap LNG, oil and gas reserves, like I think it's a third in world reserves, the tar sands. It also has some of the best sunshine for solar energy. There's huge solar projects in Alberta. It's windy, it's crazy. I lived up in Grand Prairie in high level. Like, I don't know when the wind stops blowing there. So it's so windy. And then they just have so much in the forms of energy. And one of the things that these AI companies are looking for is cheap, sustainable energy. That's why Kevin O'Leary of I think Shark Tank fame, and he's been on a few things. They call him Mr. Wonderful. Is proposing I think $70 billion project in the north of Alberta. And again, some of these computers generate lots of heat, so the north of Alberta would be a place that you get some cooling, natural cooling from the natural cold weather up there. Great place to see the Northern Lights too. Great place where the snow squeaks when you walk when it's 55 below.
I've had some of that in Ottawa as well, squeaky snow. It's been like minus 38 or something like that.
Yeah. That's like a warm day in high level Alberta.
Yeah. We should be so lucky.
You might have to put your vest on if you were a northern Alberta person. I mean, I've lived up there for 10 plus years. The north is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I lived in Thompson, Manitoba as well. And, like in the Grand Prairie area, Peace River, and my wife lived in Yellowknife. It's a different kind of area, and the people super friendly, always willing to help out, stuff like that. I think you don't experience the north, and my brother lived in Fort St. John, so the same thing as the north of BC. Great areas, great communities, great people.
Yeah, and probably sunnier than England. So
you know what? Nothing like a clear sky day in northern Alberta or any of those provinces, and that's the cold day when the stars look like they're touching the ground, the northern lights look like they're touching the ground, and it's super clear out. Only thing that's blocking your view is your is the heat that's coming out of your mouth and the clouds from the vapor or whatever, the steam coming out of your mouth, making that'd be the only thing impeding your view. In our EV section, and I've said this for a while now too, and I've been saying it probably for about a year, that I believe Ford is going to make the first deal with Tesla to integrate the software from Tesla into Ford's. And Ford's CEO Jim Farley said yesterday that the company's getting closer to deciding on whether to partner with another company on full self-driving. And he said, we're not so Pollyannish about our own capability that we're not going to look at other people's systems or not believe that level 4 personal autonomy is going to be interesting at some point. We need a strong strategy to decide. Do we partner? I'm confident. Yeah, so, and him and Elon Musk trade texts all the time, and Ford was the first company to partner with the supercharger, and that's what this ad is from Ford, talking about getting access to the largest EV charging network in the world, and that's the Tesla supercharger system. And I believe a lot of people have a lot of strong affiliation with Ford. I was a Ford guy myself, drove quite a few Fords, but people love the brand and people love the look of Fords. But if you put the Tesla software inside of a Ford, I mean, it's a killer combination.
But what kind of concession is Tesla going to require for that? What are they going to ask for?
It would be a licensing agreement, no different than any type of software arrangement, right?
But I just feel, why would Tesla? Is that enough to motivate Tesla to give one of their rivals a massive leg up?
They've already said that Elon's already said that that's in his interest to actually license the software, because his goal is to put EVs throughout the world, and he said that he doesn't believe that Tesla can do it alone. So
intriguing.
Yes, to some people the devil, and some people, the world's the person doing the most for climate. But I guess it depends how you look at it. Speaking of Tesla, for the first time I've seen Model 3 now with 0.99, there you go, 0.99 financing for the Model 3s in Canada, now available in Canada. And they didn't raise the price. Remember they were talking about raising the price by $5,000? That did not happen on February 1st.
So is he taking a leaf out of Donald Trump's book here, promising to do something and then not really doing it?
Putting the pressure on, and then maybe the pressure was like, buy now, and then all of a sudden, I don't know. But this 0.99 will be intriguing for a lot of people, because that's a way to get, you know, the use of cash without having to pay for it.
Yeah, big savings there, because what was it? It was like
Huge.
5 point something, wasn't it,
Well, I
before?
mean, like if you go to the bank, you're probably in the 8 and 9% right now for a
Yeah.
car. That's why that's slowed down sales in vehicles, is people can't afford them. The price of the vehicle is one thing, and then the financing was, you know, like just out of reach for so many people. In Alberta, talking about EVs, their new $200 electric vehicle tax has started in week 1, and I have seen, we've talked about this in the past, where there's been some people pushing out there that Daniel Smith is the only place in the world that's against EVs and is the only place doing the tax. And I tried to correct those people, because like many U.S. states, including the most EV populated place, California has a tax similar to this, and it's just basically to cover off, you know, like the road tax, right? Because these people aren't paying the road tax that you pay through the gasoline tax. As part of that goes to keeping the roads up to date, right? So it's $200 a year. Lots of savings. Energy is more expensive in Alberta though too, unless you put solar on your roof or something like that. Like the supercharger in Calgary, downtown Calgary, I think it's like 51 cents a kilowatt, and then in like Richmond, it's like 9 cents or something. And I think you said at your house it would be something like 6 cents or something.
Yeah, it's something I can't remember exactly, but something like that. It's very cheap. It's all that delicious Quebec hydro. That's what that is.
There you go. Well, all we got left is a meme. Lots to get out of that one, right? A lot of people kicking and screaming in the United States for, well, the Democrats kicking and screaming for the work that DOGE is doing, exposing a lot of payments that are being made to a lot of bizarre places. And it's to me, it's odd that people wouldn't want responsibility for tax dollars. I think we want that in Canada too. Like we've seen some of the it's coming out in, because things kind of float across the border, and right now we're seeing you know, some exposure of some of the places that the Canadian government is spending money, and we're wondering why we're spending that kind of money there. Because you know, Canadians pay high taxes, and shouldn't there be a responsibility to spend that money responsibly?
Indeed. I think a lot of the pushback, or some of the pushback at least, to DOGE is that for a lot of people, Elon Musk is just, you know, I mean, to put it simply, they just hate him. They just dislike him. He makes their skin crawl. And there seems to be, you know, he's very much, he's like that, isn't he? He divides people in a very sort of sharp way. You are, like, it seems that people either despise him or they love him. There's very little in the middle, just like neutral. And I think that's what it is. I mean, they might even quite admire what he's doing or the idea behind it, but they just hate his approach. And it's similar with Trump. Trump is almost like the exact same kind of a figure.
If you affect change, you're going to make a lot of people angry, and you're going to make a lot of people happy. But it is definitely, you're going to polarize. There's no, like, if you're making change, there's a lot of people that don't like change, no matter how it goes, right? So change is tough for people to deal with. And then getting into like how governments spend money, because I mean, we've heard Chrystia Freeland, you know, say that she doesn't know where $4 billion went. Like how don't you know where it went? Wasn't a check written to somebody? Like you can track it, no? Like, and if you can't, then maybe we should look at hiring more accountants or something, because somebody should be able to track it. No different than the We scandal, when there was a $500 million check written to the wrong company, kind of like the We charity, and then there was a We charity, kind of like a private company, and the two brothers there were going to take that check, and then they had to give it back.
Yeah, public finances. I mean, but to be fair, actually, there are similar stories at big private companies as well, like big corporations. There's a few famous, hilarious stories where people just sent bills to like IBM or something. I mean, it might not be IBM, but just some like massive corporation, just like totally random bills to be paid like $200 for whatever it is. Just make it up, and like they actually got the money. Like there are examples of that in private companies. I think it's just like any sort of large organization that has huge budgets. They do lose track of it, and I suppose it's like it's inexplicable in many ways, and it's like especially when it's public money, it's very hard to justify and explain, but it seems like it does happen across the board.
I do remember when I was first started working in a CA firm, there was a story that came out, and it was a company that registered a similar name to a very large company. I'll use Inco as an example, like Inco Inc., and then they did Inco Limited, and then they started filing GST returns for $1 million, like returns to get back $1 million. And the GST had sent them, the government of Canada had sent them, I think, 2 checks, and then they tried the third time, and then somebody had a closer look at where they're sending that money. They got busted 3 times not lucky. They should have been happy with the first 2 times they got the money. I guess they figured they had tapped a well, that there was an endless supply in that well. But I think more responsibility for how our money's spent would seem like a good thing. I think we've seen, most Canadians work really, really hard for their money, and a lot of it goes to taxation. So more responsible spending. I think we've heard many times through the federal government where they don't remember, but can't provide information as to where those dollars went.
Yeah, it's a good idea to have more scrutiny of how taxpayers' money is spent, really, isn't it? I think almost everybody would agree with that. Well, like, what's the worst that could happen,
It may be a tough argument to make.
Waste as you expected.
It'd be a tough argument to make not to have scrutiny, and that's the part that like we've seen now is where the NDP and the Liberals have blocked oversight on some of those expenditures. You know what I mean? Like instead of like us digging into where it went, the same thing as this green that they say there's $200 million that perhaps allegedly Stephen Jabot's company has taken, and they won't allow oversight on that. That in itself is a problem, wouldn't you think?
And that is what has that's what's locked up Parliament for the last few months, and it's been because the Tories have been filibustering, haven't they? They've been using like a bit of a loophole in the parliamentary system to prevent any business being done until those documents are released.
I do have Holly Doan of Blacklock's on at 11. We'll be doing a live stream with her. She's been in a fight with the federal government because she has a subscription-based news platform, and she only looks at parliamentary stuff. And one government buys a $314 subscription from her and then shares it with all the other government arms. And what I found interesting was, like, it's found in all this DOGE stuff that the Canadian government was also paying Politico like close to $100,000 for subscriptions, but so they only want to pay $314 to a Canadian media outlet, but they're willing to pay $100,000 for subscriptions to a US-based left-leaning outlet.
Yeah, an outlet that doesn't really scrutinize the Canadian government in the way that Blacklock's does, which is an important point.
And then we did see a tweet that you and I were talking about. We did see a tweet from Francois Champagne, the MP, Liberal MP, saying that they were down there in Washington and in the offices and using the boardroom of none other than Politico. So maybe part of that $100,000 was to pay for office space.
Yeah, or maybe they just wanted to get their money's worth.
It's odd though, right? So you have a Canadian media outlet that's based in Ottawa that's getting $314. No different than our thing that we talked about yesterday, and that you've reached out to Pascal St-Onge, MP for the Heritage Minister, that has put that Bill C-18 in place to block, which turned into a block of Facebook banning news outlets in Canada from putting news content on Facebook or Instagram. And then the federal government said that they would stop advertising on those platforms. And lo and behold, we got a news thing yesterday that says they're now advertising, and the government is free to advertise at their own choice on those platforms. And their reasoning was that Canadians can't access the information because the news can't go on those platforms. And just like, what? You're the one stopping the news from going on those platforms.
Yeah, they said there's something like we have to recognize that for a lot of people in Canada, social media is their primary means of accessing information or something along those lines, and that therefore we have to break this boycott that we've instigated against Meta, a company, by the way, that the federal government describes as a sort of danger to democracy, which I think in liberal terms, that's the equivalent of saying that they're basically in league with Satan. So it's just about as bad as it can be. But because the GST tax break is such a massive policy, it's so crucial that the Canadian people know about this, they've had to break that boycott. And they've just had to recognize that, unfortunately, Canadians insist on using this Facebook and Instagram malarkey, so we're going to have to break our own boycott. Meanwhile, news companies, you're still not going to be able to go onto these crucial platforms because you need to hold the line because we're having a war with Meta.
Yeah, definitely. And many media outlets have already folded under that pressure. And it's definitely hurt us as well. It was a platform of 200,000 for us. We earned that platform. We've been asking for that back. We've sent so many emails. We've asked so many times. And they basically are unresponsive. We definitely want to answer some of the comments and stuff on here too. And I see I have a friend there, Brett, that and I worked in many of the places that Brett's worked. He's been in Fox Creek, High Level, Grand Prairie, and he said he was in Churchill. So we must have been following each other around. Great places.
Churchill's got polar bears, hasn't it? If I'm not wrong.
There you go.
It's a nice little perk.
Yeah, you got some of the best fishing up there too for pickerel. Some of the best fish you'll ever have too, pickerel. If you like fish and chips, pickerel. Well, you must be a fish and chips kind of fan, no?
Massive fish and chips fan. Yeah.
They got pickerel in Ontario too, no?
I'm not really a pickerel guy, I have to confess. I'm more of a just old-fashioned cod. Give me the cod.
Give that pickerel a try. That's our week. That's our week. That's it for the week. We're back Monday. We're around 9 o'clock every morning. It's about an hour long or longer, depending on how long me and Ian just kind of rant about things. Again, we do thank you for commenting, and then we do like the fact checking. Kim Campbell, I think somebody had written in there that it was 132 days in office. So we do appreciate that. We do appreciate all the comments, the thoughts, and like sometimes like the criticisms are great too, right? We are an independent media outlet based in Kelowna. We don't receive any government funding. All we want back is our Facebook and Instagram. And if the federal government is now saying that Meta is good enough for them, then they should allow us to have our Facebook and Instagram back. And we've been trying to reach out to speak to these Liberal candidates and see what their policy would be on this Bill C-18. So there you have it.
We wait. We keep on waiting, don't we?
We wait patiently. Maybe not so patient. Anyway, we do thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.